Well, hi everybody. We got about 4 minutes. I just wanted to let you know we're here, and I'm hoping you can see my screen, and we'll give another 4 minutes for people to join.
We
I didn't
can't see
want.
your screen yet.
Oh,
Let
you
me
can't.
let me fix that.
Okay. There. I got to show my screen. There we go. So yeah, so we'll just give everybody about 4 more minutes, and then we'll get started. Hope everybody's having a good Friday. And, the great part is it is Friday.
I'd also like to let folks know it looks like we do have captioning available. So please check into that if you're needing that accommodation.
Two minutes. 2 minutes. So if you need to do something, need to step away, now is a good time. All right. It is the top of the hour according to uh, my clock on my monitors. Um, so I just wanted to do a check-in to see if anybody has any questions from Wednesday, or have you thought of something that you want more information about? So if you can just write information, and one that will let me know if there's something that you want more information on, or if you have questions from Wednesday.
So far, Amy has said good morning. Yes, yay, Friday.
I understand. So I'm gonna jump in. Um, so we were talking about dimension three. So dimension three goes into the percentage of rent, and I think I went over that and how you scored that. Um, and I'm hoping that that made sense to everybody. Dimension four is about integration. And again, the scoring is 1, 2, 4. And basically, this is saying that we're not putting everybody in the same buildings and creating our little mini public housing or mini segregated housing. We want people to be in the community. We want people to be scattered throughout the community and not um, being put into the same type of, housing or in housing that's specifically designed for people with special needs. The rights of tenancy is pretty clear. Um, and it's actually the easiest one that I think out of all of the ones, this is pretty much the easiest one because this all this is saying is that the tenant has a lease in their name. Um, and so it's easy to prove that when if you're doing the work, you have a copy of everybody's lease in their file, or you have a booklet where all the leases are kept. Um, it's fairly easy. There's another part of it that says that there are no special rules that will be attached to the lease. And this only gets to be a problem if you're putting people into programming housing. There are some rules. But if the person is choosing that housing and it's documented well, you're gonna take a hit on the rules, but you're gonna do well on choice. Again, remember I said there are no perfect scores. This dimension um really focuses on the access to housing. And I think I talked about this, that you in your programs can have the best intentions and have zero exclusion, meaning you work with whoever comes to you, which is great. But in the readiness criteria is also looking at not just how you do your work, but how your agency is also giving people access to housing. And so this is not just about your program, this is about your entire agency. Or it could be about if you only take referrals from certain programs. So it's really looking at the structure of your program and making sure that nowhere in this system are we placing readiness criteria on people. I'll give you an example. There was this group that I worked with that was in, I believe they were in North Carolina, and they said, we don't know what the problem is. We have not had any problems in doing permanent supportive housing. It is easy. Why are people struggling with doing permanent supportive housing? And I started taking a look at their numbers of the people that they had in their program and how many people they had found housing, and those people were maintaining their housing. And I thought, wow, you guys might have found the answers. Like, let me keep looking at this and maybe we can take you, you can go on the road and we can put you on a webinar and you could explain to people, because your program is amazing. It's got amazing outcomes. Well, the more and more I looked, I found out that all of their referrals came from a long time program where people had been in temporary housing and also in substance use treatment that was mandatory. So everybody was coming out of a place where they had been clean and sober for at least 1 year or more, and then coming to this program and getting housing. So they were only taking this small segment of people coming from other programs, which is why they were successful. They weren't out talking to and dealing with people on the streets. They were taking people who had already proven themselves and had graduated from this other long term program, and they were taking them into their program. That that became, and when they found out, because they were like, we take whoever they refer, but they were only being referred the people who had successfully um completed that program. It put a stop to everything, because that's not what permanent supportive housing is about. Yes, they were probably filling a need and a gap in the community, but it was not, there was a readiness criteria imposed. Whether they accepted it or not, they were only taking certain people of a certain segment. So people couldn't walk in off the streets and get housing. They weren't going out finding people on the streets. They were only taking people who had made a decision to deal with their substance use. Does that make sense? And do people understand how and why that's, even though the agency wasn't doing anything except they were only taking these people from this program? So it readiness doesn't have to be about your program in particular. It's how you're getting the word out there to people. How do people, is it easy for people who say I want housing to get into your program, or do they have to go through other programs first? And I'm hoping that makes sense to everybody on the call.
Cedric says yes, and I just wanted to throw in, sometimes people or programs will offer a class called, renting readiness or something
Hmm.
like that. And that's again, we do want to teach people those skills, but making access to housing dependent on completing this course is kind of a barrier.
Yes, it is a barrier. And we don't want to put up barriers, because what the research has shown us, that no matter what we come up with, nobody has come up with what how, when people are ready for housing. And to me, that's fairly simple. Everybody's ready for housing. Everybody should have housing. Our job as staff are to get people ready while we're working with them, not to put up these barriers so that they don't get into the program, but to start working with people. When they come and say, I want housing, we start working with them. And you can be fairly successful doing that. It really just requires all of the staff to understand and really promote that, and work with people, and be willing to work with some very difficult people who may, not difficult people, but people with that have had difficult backgrounds, and helping them to figure out a way to make this work for them. Another thing we look at in readiness criteria: who holds the keys to the unit. Um, some places you don't get keys, and a lot of those places are programs where you don't get a key. The keys are by the staff. You have to sign in and sign out to get to your apartment. Um, Sometimes they put restrictions on your guests, how many guests you can have. Can you have guests? Can you have overnight guests? That is not consistent with people having their own housing. If you look at most of us, we can decide if we want to have a guest over. We can decide who we want to have in our apartments. Um, Another thing that we take a look at is who can enter the unit without the tenant there. That has to go by fair housing. So for instance, if you have your own housing, your agency has housing, and your agency decides that we're gonna do this program, we're gonna move people from this program into our own housing, and but then the service staff have keys to everybody's unit and decide and part of the program is they can go in anytime and check and see what's going on, and that is not fair housing. That is not a typical apartment. For those of us who have apartments, there are rules as to when even the landlord can enter our uh, apartment. Landlords can only enter your apartment if there's an emergency or they give you at least 48-hour notice. And so if there's an emergency, say for instance, your unit, the water pipe broke in your unit and is flooding the apartments below. A landlord can go into your unit to shut down the water to figure out what's going on. That's an emergency. Uh, Also, another emergency can be that you, as a staff person in services, hasn't seen a client in a week, haven't heard from them, and you're worried about their safety. You can do a safety check to make sure that that person is okay. Um, but that's different than just going into somebody's unit. Um, s- Service staff should not hold on to keys to people's units. That
This
is
is
not a service activity.
this is Wanda. Can we talk a little bit about the liability for the agency if service staff enter the unit without the tenant there?
Absolutely. Well, you're if the person has a lease and with your agency and the service staff entered the person's apartment, there is a lot of liability that is there for your agency. And I've seen where tenants have sued or have taken the agency to court for somebody coming into their apartment without their notice or without telling them. I also had one, I actually, when I was running housing, I had, now this, the person knew that the tenant was, that the staff was coming into the unit. But here's where we made the mistake. We went into the unit to fix something. The tenant was there by himself. I mean, the staff person was there by himself. The tenant came home and said that the staff person had stolen money. Now, this is an extreme situation, but it goes to show you how quickly innocent acts can be seen as um, getting your agency in trouble. The issue with the staff person working in the unit was he was working in the kitchen on something and he had to go to the restroom. He went to the restroom. The tenant wasn't there. The tenant came home and something that the tenant had put on the bathroom door was ajar, and he knew that the staff person had gone into the bathroom, and he claimed that the staff person had looked in his bathroom and stole $500 that he had in his medicine cabinet. The staff person said he didn't do it, but the tenant called the police, had the police come, and they arrested the staff person. I get a call from other staff saying, we just, one of our maintenance guys was just arrested and the tenant is not going to drop charges until we pay him back his $500. And if we don't pay it back, he's just going to press charges against this employee. So as a staff person, I had to make a decision about what to do, and we ended up paying the tenant $500 to get the staff person out of jail. And it was a good lesson for us because what it meant was, no, if you're going, even for the staff who are going in to repair something, either go in a pair, and if you go in to fix something, don't wander around the house. Don't go into, even if the person's not there and you have to go to the restroom, you should not be going to their restroom. You should be going to find a different restroom. So it's just, we really have to respect people's privacy and respect people's rights. Nobody can go into your units without your knowing about it or without it being an emergency. And that's the same right that everybody we work with has, unless they're in a program and that program has different rules. Does that make sense? And I know a lot of service people want to hold on to keys because the client will say, well, I always lose my keys and I'm worried. I don't want to pay the fees because when you get locked out or you lose your key, you have to pay a fee. Our job is to help educate that tenant and work with that tenant to develop some solutions that hopefully don't involve staff. Um, but if they have to involve staff, then we need to make sure that, you know, we have something in place that will prevent that key from becoming, used by anybody. So I've seen a couple of agencies who said, well, we really do want to provide that service for our tenants because it's not fair to have to pay $50 if they get locked out of their unit. So we're going to hold the keys. And my recommendation was have a policy for that and put those keys in a locked box with only certain staff having key to the locked box so that we could monitor who could get to the keys. And then there had to be a policy or a way for if a tenant needed their own key, having them sign something saying this that they took their own key. And you have to think about making sure that your staff are not being put in harm's way by having this loosey goosey policy or no policy about keys, and staff holding on to those keys thinking they're helping their tenants, when in essence we should be teaching them about, okay, so you lock yourself out of your unit a lot, maybe there's a way to make an extra key and either give that key to somebody you trust or put that key someplace that you only have access to it, or maybe having a neighbor that you trust hold on to the key. Think helping them to think through and problem solve what they can do other than the staff being the only alternate. Now, in some cases, you might be the only alternate. And if that's the case and your agency decides to hold on the keys, you really need to make sure that everybody is clear about what the policy is and who can get in and get that key and use it. And it should never be used without the tenant knowing about it. And that should be in the policy. Does that make sense? I'm going to assume it's making sense.
We got one yes.
Okay, I'll take the one yes. If it doesn't make sense, please say something. I don't want to keep, going through this and thinking that it's making sense if it's not. So the last dimension is that our services have to be flexible and voluntary. So here's what gets looked at and what gets counted when we're looking at voluntary flexible services. We want to make sure there's a menu of options for types of services to choose from. We don't want to see just, no menu of choices or no menu of services. We want to see a wide array of services. We want to see also that a person can change the frequency and intensity of those services. So, for instance, and we talked about this a little bit on Wednesday, some people might need more intensive services in the beginning when they move into their apartment. And then after a while, they may not need as intensive services, or they may not want it. They may need it, but they may not want it. And if they don't want it, we can't force it on them. So this means staff have to be creative, staff have to figure out different ways to provide things and help people get information and help them get it in a way that they can take it and that they want it. There has to be an option that a person can choose no services. Now, I know a lot of nonprofits have rules that if you don't see a staff person every so often, you are seen as non-compliant and they can close your case. That cannot be the case in permanent supportive housing. A person can choose no services, and meaning they get to keep the live in that apartment, and they can say, I don't want your services. Your agency can say, okay, we're going to close their case. Then you're not really abiding by permanent supportive housing, and you need to have a different policy. So if your agency has a policy of after so many tries or no contact after so many days, people get, put on the list or they get dropped off the list, you need a different policy for your program. One that says that people can choose no services. If you don't have a policy there that says that, um, we get a little suspicious. We also part of this whole process is we also, when you get your fidelity reviews, we also talk to some of the tenants. And so some of these questions will not only be asked of staff, will not only be looked at in your paperwork, but we will ask the clients, uh, was that an option for them? Um, are the services consumer driven? We want to make sure that the consumers are asking for the services that they get, or that uh, clients don't feel like they're being pushed to choose from services that they may need but they don't want. So if you only have a small thing where you're saying, well, we do everything in groups here and people have to come to the groups. Anybody who gets in our housing has to come to these groups. That is not consumer driven, that's staff driven. Now, if a consumer says, oh, would you mind if I start up an AA group? Then that's a consumer driven service. Or if somebody says, I want to learn how to cook, that's consumer driven. Um, we don't want the staff can give a long list of things that people can choose from, but we can't force it on people. We don't want to have all of the services be staff driven. We also look at caseload size. And caseload size is important because you're doing a lot of work with people. Uh, the staff who do permanent supportive housing. You're working with people from taking them off the streets to helping them hopefully find housing and then helping them keep the housing. That's intensive. That's a lot of work. You cannot do this job with a large caseload. So you need to make sure that the caseload size is appropriate for the work that you're doing. And is there a question about what the caseload size is? And if somebody asks that, I want somebody on the phone who's been doing this for a long time to tell me what the caseload size is for permanent supportive housing.
No volunteers yet. Adelina says up to 15, and Camille says 15 to 20.
Yeah, usually 15 to 20. When you
Cedric
start,
said 50.
said what?
50.
Oh God, no. No, 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 no 50. 15 to 20. Period. If you're doing more, you lose points because you can't do this job without with that many people. Now I'm gonna give you a clue because a lot of people say, well, I have 50 people on my caseload, but a lot of them really, I'm still in the process of trying to engage them. I say that the managers of those programs need to come up with a way to have you working with an active caseload of 15 to 20 people. Now you can have another caseload to the side of people who are not engaged. And so when one of them is ready to engage, you can add them to your caseload, but your caseload should not be filled up with people who aren't engaged or people who are not ready or who are not really coming to see you. Your caseload should be 15 to 20 of people actively somewhere in the process of either wanting to get into housing or are already into housing. And so for instance, once people start getting into housing and getting to a place where they're feeling stable and comfortable and they don't want you as much, you can put them on a different caseload where they're in maintenance. And they may have some issues that come up, but they're in maintenance for the most part. You're not kicking them off your caseload, but you just have a maintenance caseload. And so that means that those people don't need your services, but they something may come up and they may need something here and there. Um, but you can't fill up your caseloads with people who are not engaged. And you should not have a caseload of 15 people who are housed and are stable. That's really, that those people can go to a different caseload. Your caseload needs to be a mix of people looking for housing and a mix of people who are in housing that you're trying to get to a place that they're comfortable.
This is Wanda. I just wanted to chime in here. This is kind of a continuation of, can a person change the frequency and intensity of the services they're getting? Because people's needs change over time. We also have several comments here. And Vanessa Vaughn from CVAB has her hand raised. So
Okay.
uh, let's see here. Kip Malone says, but we have to keep adding in people, so our caseload may look like 30, even though we only work with 20 at a time.
Well, that's why your agency needs to develop a policy to put some of those people on a different caseload. The people who you are trying to hunt down shouldn't be clogging up your caseload.
All right. And then Emily said, oh, I work and interact with almost 70 people.
Ooh. Oh no, see, okay, so whoever's in charge of those programs need to think about and put together some policies about your caseload and making sure that your caseload is of active people. And if you have 70 people on your caseload in permanent supportive housing, I can tell you that your program is probably not going to be doing very well with outcomes because that's too many people. You cannot do this job with 70 people on a caseload.
Yeah, in HARPS, we talk about churn a little bit in the contract because you can kind of work with a lot of people, but you only can really focus on a few to get those outcomes that you need. And Camille says, does that include people who are maintenance that are only seen once a month to make sure that they do not need anything?
Yeah, I would put them on a maintenance caseload where they're not on my active caseload, they're in maintenance. So we check in once a month or they call me and that's it. And they could go on maintenance. And that way you can start working on other cases where people need more assistance. Um, so really trying to, it's up to the program managers to come up with a system that works because now they have this recipe. There's a recipe here. And so what you can say is, look, okay, I got 70 people on my caseload, but of those 70 people, only 20 are really actively engaged. So those 20 should become your active caseload. The rest of the people, if the other 50 people are really, every now and then you see them, but you don't see them on a regular basis, you are trying to hunt them down, they go on a different caseload because you can't you there's no way that you should be just trying to hunt down people. um but that's a whoever is in charge of your program, that's something that they need to be focused on, is trying to think of ways to keep your caseload sizes down. Because I can guarantee you, with 70 people on a caseload, if they're all active, there is no way you can do that job and do it well with 70 people. Not with how intense this is and how many landlords because you also have to be out there engaging landlords. I don't know how you can do this job with 70 people or even 50.
All right, Emily thanks you. She's gonna take this up with her supervisor. Um, I've got a number of comments here. Uh, let's see. Camille wants to know how many people can you have on a maintenance caseload?
You can have a lot of people on a maintenance caseload as long as they're just in maintenance. And maintenance means that they are pretty set. They only need check in once a month, or they only will call you if they need something. They all can go on maintenance. And that means that gives you a way to keep them active, but not be keeping clogging up your caseload with them. So you can keep them active until whatever the funding runs out, and then you can close those cases. But because I'm assuming you can't serve people for indefinitely. Like, I mean, there's a end to the services. Um, Based on the funding. So whenever the funding ends for that person, then you can close out that case. But I always tell, even when I close out those cases, I tell people, look, if you run into any issues, feel free to contact me. Don't end up getting yourself evicted and feeling like you can't come to me. Come to me because I know if I can do anything or step in and help that person save their housing, it's going to be a lot easier than letting them become homeless again and having them come back through the program again for the second and third and fourth time. So you can put a lot of people on maintenance as long as they're really in maintenance. Now, if they need to check in once a week, that's not maintenance. Maintenance is once a month, or they call you when something's going on.
Fantastic. Stephen had something to say quite a bit. So, Stephen, I was going to let you read it yourself. I'm going to unmute you real quick. I'm going to try.
Okay, one moment, please.
There you go.
Okay, so I just want to, so as I was saying, explaining, I run a resource center. So I
Uh-huh.
have walk-in clients, and I'm sort of a walk-in case manager, so to speak, of about 120-ish people.
Uh-huh.
But that being said, it's not always safe to assume that the ones who aren't contacting me aren't having any difficulty, especially
Right.
right now. I mean, this
Oh,
crisis,
absolutely.
it's caused a lot of people to relapse.
Hmm.
Um, so, I mean, technically, they're maintenance clients, but given this crisis, it's a lot of maintenance.
Yeah, well, and that's yeah, there's this situation to deal with. We have COVID going on, and a lot of people are stressed, and we have, the racial inequities popping its ugly head. So yeah, there are some people where they might have been at maintenance, but they need more right now. And I still think 120 people who are going through a crisis is not manageable for one person. And I understand that you're like the walk-in case manager, but that's a lot of people to try to manage, especially when with that this much stress going on. So, I would say that your agency needs to figure out a way to divvy up those people. If you're charging money to the 1115 waiver, then you could add case managers. Your team or your system can add case managers because most of their salary will be paid if people are in the permanent supportive housing program, because they get paid for the work they do. So yeah, 120, it seems overwhelming. Am I
Um,
am I wrong about that?
I mean, some days, yes. Other days, I don't see anybody.
Yeah.
Uh, the problem is, of course, funding. I mean, the dollar always comes down to that.
Yeah, well, if your agency is doing this program, um they could always add case managers, because I mean, basically, as long as they keep a case manager with an active caseload of 15 to 20, that salary would be paid for by the waiver. But that's if people are in the permanent supportive housing program. If it's a drop in where people are just coming in with a bunch of different issues and not all of them housing, then yeah, that would not be funded by the waiver.
So we have about roughly 90 folks, or at least households, in permanent supportive. But
Uh-huh.
then we have two transitional buildings. What about
Okay.
those folks?
So your agency owns the buildings. Is
Yeah,
that
it does.
correct? Okay, so you have oh, so are you just helping people maintain their housing?
Basically, yeah. So for the permanent supportive, it's helping them maintain their housing, helping them improve their lives. For transitional, of course, it's having them be ready to transition back into society to be more self-sufficient.
Right. So if your agency is working in this program with either harps or with the waiver, the 1115 Medicaid waiver, they can add.
foundational community supports,
Pardon?
foundational community supports through AmeriGroup.
Oh, okay. So yeah, they could. So yeah, your agency can bring on extra case managers to help manage that if you're trying to keep people housed.
Awesome, thank you. I appreciate you telling me about that.
Yeah, yeah. So they just yeah, that salary can be paid for through this program. So I'm not sure why they are not bringing in another case manager to assist.
To be fair to them, they manage a lot of different sites.
Oh,
I'm
I
the
know
only.
that. But yeah, no, I get it. But at the same time, I would just make them aware that if through this program, they could bring in another case manager, and
Okay,
that most of that case manager's salary is going to be paid through this program.
yeah, I can do that. Definitely, thank you.
Uh-huh, not a problem. Um, Another thing in doing this is that the services should be provided by a team of people. Um, And why and you probably are wondering, or some of you probably know why a team. And one of the things I will say is, if it's only one person dealing with this, like poor Steve, like, 120 people, that's not reasonable. And if Steve gets sick or something happens, then what? Who takes that on? So if you have a team of people and everybody is aware of what's going on, when you do want to go on vacation or when you do get sick, somebody on the team can pick up the slack because they'll know what's going on with this person. The thing is, you don't want to have it just be one person, or you divide up the task so that one person is out there talking to landlords, one person is helping people maintain their housing, one person is doing this. What happens is, when you don't have a team of people working closely together and all knowing all the same information, you end up with, if the person comes in to get services and their case manager who works with them to maintain their housing is out on vacation, nobody else on the team does that job or knows what's going on, then that puts that person in jeopardy, because that person might not be willing to sit and go through their story again with another person, or they're going to be frustrated. I've already told this person all of this information and now I got to explain it again to the next person. And then tomorrow I may be working with a different person and I might have to tell this story again and again and again. And we want continuity of services. And the way you get that is by working as a team where everybody on the team has the same responsibilities. Everybody gets to talk to the landlord, because, if I have a person that I'm working with and they tell me what they want, um, it's fine to have one person out there doing these, talking to landlords. But if the landlord has an issue with the person once they move in, who are they going to call? Do they call that first person they made this relationship with, or do they call you? Or, it gets very confusing if you don't have a team approach.
Hey,
Um,
Pat,
yeah.
Leilani had a question about how long a client should be on maintenance before we let them be on their own.
How long does the grant provide funding? Is it 9 months?
So my understanding for FCS, it's a 6-month authorization period. And for HARPs, it's indefinite.
So there's your answer. So if you're on the FCS, it's you can hold people in maintenance up to 6 months. Now, if there's an extenuating circumstance where you feel like you need more time, then you can apply to get more funding for that. Um, but for FCS, you got 6 months. For HARPs, you have indefinite that they can be on maintenance. Did that answer your question? Another thing we look at is, are the services available 24/7? One of the things we know is that if people are in housing problems don't just occur from 9 to 5 or 8 to 4. Most housing problems are going to occur when? In the evening and on the weekend. So does your agency have a plan of how they're going to deal with that? Now, I've seen agencies come up with very interesting plans. One agency, the way I did it was, we had one cell phone and it was the on-call cell phone, and every staff had to hold on to that. So everybody got a week, 1 week. And then so what that allowed us to do was that everybody had the same phone number. If they needed help, they could call it. if it was your time to be on call, you could get a phone call in the middle of the night about any client. It could be your client or one of your colleagues' clients. But because you're working in a team environment, you have a little idea of what's going on and you can assist in an emergency. I know some teams that are saying, okay, we're available, Monday through Friday from 9 to 6. And then after that, we give everybody a emergency, one of the crisis lines or one of the help lines to call. Somehow you need to make sure that we're able to provide services to people from 24/7, because most of the things are going to happen after hours. Most of the crises, most of the the issues will take place after hours. Makes sense? Everybody clear about that? So I'm gonna keep going. So how do we know what to score? So if you're doing a Fidelity site visit, what are you going to be looking at? So one of the things you're going to have to look at is what are the policies and procedures. Now, if notice in this, I have brought up the policies and procedures because sometimes when you have multiple staff, you need to make sure they understand how you want them to work together or work on things. And everybody needs to be clear on what they're supposed to do. And the only way sometimes you can do that is with policies and procedures. So when you're going, if you're a Fidelity reviewer and you're going out, you need to read the policies and procedures to see if staff are told that this is how we do things. Is there a policy about zero exclusion? About how anybody who wants housing should be able to get housing? Is there a policy about caseload size so that everybody's clear about, this is the caseload size and this is what we have to stick with and this is what we're doing? So one of the things you're going to have to do in a Fidelity site visit is read through policies and procedures. The great part is that not everybody will get to the honor to do that because we do it as a team. We may split up some of the policies and procedures, or one person may get to go through the policies and procedures while another person is interviewing somebody. We do also do interviews. We do interviews with the participants. That means that we ask to speak to some of the people in the program, and we ask to speak to those people without the staff being present. We don't want the staff to be in there because people feel like they may feel like they have to say something, or they look every time before they answer something, they're looking at the staff to make sure that they're saying the right thing. We need to hear from the participants. They need to feel comfortable. They need to be able to give us their opinion. We ask about a bunch of different questions. Um, and I will show you an example. This is just an example of um, one of the things that we do with that we bring up for staff. So let me see if I can quickly find um, okay. One of the things, well, this actually the form that is on, and I'm assuming you can see this form on your screen. This form that I have up here is an example of when you're doing a chart review. This gives you a way to find out what stuff you should be looking for in the file. And you can complete one of these for every file that you review. So if, say you decide not to become a Fidelity reviewer, well, this would be good for you to know because you need to know what they're going to be looking for when they come to do a Fidelity review of your agency. So if you notice in this, we We have basically the client's initials, because we don't need Fidelity reviewers don't need to know the person's name, who the reviewer is. Um, and wow, I think I gave you the wrong one. This is the supported employment fidelity review. Well, the one for housing looks very similar to this one. And I don't know why I brought up the employment one. So I apologize, but it looks very similar.
Hey, Pat,
Yeah.
not to throw you off, but we still have a couple of questions from the last segment.
Okay, go ahead.
This one I think might be more of a HCA trainer question, but I'll let it rip. The funding with FCS requires you to have interactions and document I think she means documentation in order to get the funding. Sometimes
Correct.
it's tough to complete if people are in that maintenance when funders require productive case notes.
That is true. And so the thing is, you may not get paid for the people who are in maintenance, which is a decision that your agency has to make. But I think, if you help people get into that housing and you promised landlords you would be there, I would try to keep people in maintenance at least until the funding ended for that person. But yes, you're correct. You have to have an active engagement. Um, so when you say that, that means also that the people that you don't see on a regular basis or that you're trying to engage, you might not have active engagement with them. That's why I think it's important to manage caseloads and to really have a caseload of 15 to 20 people where some of those people are just getting into housing, some of those people are trying to get into housing, because that's a manageable caseload. If you have a caseload of 20 people all looking for housing, that's a difficult caseload and it's going to require a lot of energy and a lot of effort. But once you get some of those people housed, then the caseload will be manageable. But I think it's really important to take a look at that and take a look at how does your program want to operate? What is your program trying to do? And that's a question for whoever manages the programs, is to figure out, what do we do with the people who are maintaining? Do we want to just drop them and keep moving on? And that may be a decision that some agencies make. I'm just giving you options of things that I've seen, things that have worked, but your agency has to decide how they want to do it.
And I just want to add to that. I know with FCS, they give you a certain number of, in housing, it's a daily rate. They give you a certain number of days each month that you can use for the 6 month. So if you have somebody that needs my understanding is also you can front load that. So if they need more attention at the beginning of the process and then less at after they've been housed, you can manage that. Also, if they need more longer, you can request additional um, allotments so that you can serve them better, longer, and more frequently. But the next question we have is talking about the 24-hour, 7-day a week availability.
Mm-hmm.
They said it would make more sense if they were on salary and not hourly, and that she would have to speak with her supervisor because they don't allow overtime.
I,
And
I agree, and I think that's an agency discussion, but I think if they're doing permanent supportive housing and they are trying to get paid through the FCS program, that FCS program stipulates that services should be 24/7. So your agency may be willing to take a hit on that particular part of the fidelity scale. But yes,
This,
I am in total agreement with you.
this is one that I just kind of want to echo what you said earlier. Some agencies flex their schedules for their staff so that they can help people move in on weekends and stuff like that. Another thing that HARPS agencies do is, give numbers to the crisis line so that, if there's something wrong in the middle of the night, there's somebody on the phone.
Yeah. No, and I've seen people do it very different ways. Um, I ran the program, so I was able to dictate um the what we were gonna do and how we were gonna enact permanent supportive housing. So we had that, like I said, we had the phone that everybody got a chance to use. And it was nice because the teams were large enough that, nobody was going to be on call for more than a week, a month. Um, and there was also a schedule so everybody knew when their week was going to be so that, people could plan around that. But what after I had that, one of the things I added to our department was I added the employment program. And when I added the employment program, what I heard from our participants was, okay, now I'm working, but I work the same hours as you. And when I get home, I have nobody I can talk to. I don't have any case management, and I need some case management. So another thing I enacted was every staff person had to flex 1 day a week to make it a later day. And so instead of working from 9 to 5 or 8 to 4, I would have some staff working from 12 to 8. So they could be home or be at the office in the evening in case some of the tenants or some of the people, the participants who were working needed to talk to somebody. That was not popular, but we did it, and I did it as well. So everybody had to work one late day a week. They could choose the day, but it had to be everybody had one late day. It didn't mean we had full coverage every evening, but we had enough coverage in the evening for if people needed to talk to somebody, they could. So
Thank you.
in this whole process, you're going to be doing, if you're a fidelity reviewer, you get to interview participants. We have a special form for how you interview participants, which I think is what I was going to go pull up. So let me pull up the form. I'm pretty sure we got the forms out there to everybody. So ignore my whole screen. It's a mess. Don't look at my calendar. It's a mess. Um, Let me see if I can find because I think it'll be good for you to be able to see the forms that we give out to people and what we're asking people. And I want to get your input on this as well. Um, so let me see if I can find it fairly quick. Because that's one thing is that a lot of people get uncomfortable um, doing interviews because they feel like they don't know what they're looking for. Well, you are looking for all of those dimensions of permanent supportive housing. So can you see my screen? Can you see this is the peer specialist interview.
Yes.
So most teams have a peer on the team. And so we do a separate interview for the peers. So you'll see that it's a fairly simple, we go through this thing about why we're doing this interview. We ask people to describe the implementation of permanent supportive housing within your organization. So we let the person just talk. Um, we ask them to describe their role on the team. Anybody have an idea why we're asking the peer specialists about their role on the team? Nobody has a clue?
Great question. No responses yet.
Well, one of the reasons why we're asking this question of peer specialists, we want to make sure that peer specialists are treated fairly and that they're not the team that gets to do all the grunt work. We want to make sure that they're treated fairly and that, if they're going to be a case manager, they should be a case manager. They should not be having, being paid as a peer specialist, but the case managers make more money, but yet this person is doing all the work. So we're
Somebody,
just trying to we're
somebody
trying
wanted you to repeat the question.
uh why are we asking peer specialists to describe their role on the team?
Thank you. Go ahead and
Okay.
finish your
So
thought. Right in.
yeah. Oh no, it's okay. We also are asking them what are their responsibilities? Are they similar or distinct from the housing specialists? Now, we want to make sure that everything is fair. We want to make sure that their peers involved. A lot of times the peers are the people who get to help people maintain their housing. That's fine. But if their job is the same as the housing specialist, then their title should be housing specialist. We're also asking them if they carry a caseload. And a lot of times the peers have a caseload. We want to know what the size of that caseload is. Again, we're looking at that caseload size. It should be 15 to 20. If it's more than that, you're going to lose some points because we know that it's hard to do the job when your caseload is too big. Um, we ask them about meetings. What is your what? And we also ask, what is your relationship to the clinical or case management staff? Do you have regular meetings? Are there areas of cooperation or difficulty? So a lot of times, we're this question is being asked because people remember what I said. We're not just looking at your program. We're looking at how do you work within that agency? Are the clinical staff on board with housing? Are they doing, if your agency is a referral based agency, are the clinical and case management staff referring people to the housing staff? Do you get to meet with the clinical staff and have conversations about the people you're working with and the people that they're working with so that you all are treating the whole person?
This
We
is
ask,
one I
yeah,
just want to throw in a plug for our peers. Uh, so as a peer, we've got some experience with recovery. We can see around some corners the professional clinical staff might not see. And likewise, the professional clinical staff has a different perspective that we might not see. And so when we meet and talk about the people we have in common, we can serve them better.
absolutely. And I am a very advocate for having peers on staff. And if you don't have peers, I would really advise you to do that. Um, and so I think it's important that you have peers on your team. We ask the peer specialists to talk about progress made in moving people from chronic homelessness. We asked how many people have moved. Where have they moved to? How many people is in your team actively working with people? Um, Anybody have ideas about which dimensions these questions are in regards to? When we ask how many people have moved, where have they moved to? How many people is your team actively working with? Anybody have an idea about um, which dimensions we're talking about?
Somebody wants you to say it again.
So all of these questions that you see on your screen, how many people have moved? Anybody know which dimension of permanent supportive housing that question is about?
Somebody said choice, integration.
Both, absolutely. So where have people moved to? That's definitely integration, and that's also choice. Where are people getting to choose where they move to? How many people in your team is actively working with uh, the client, with the participants? Again, we want to see the team approach. We don't want to see people, everybody has their caseload and nobody else knows what you're doing with your caseload. We ask about barriers have you encountered in this initiative? We asked what would it take to make the permanent supportive housing initiative more successful? We have what has been helpful in implementation of permanent supportive housing? And then we ask the question, is there anything else we should know about the role of peer specialists in this program? And then we have a lot more questions. Um, we have the housing options. And so this, we tell you what you're asking these questions about, so you don't have to guess. So we're asking questions about the type of housing options. What type of house, what to what extent are program participants offered choice in their type of housing unit? For example, a choice among an ordinary apartment, a subsidized apartment, a unit in agency owned housing. Everybody should be able to guess. That's housing options. That's all about choice. And choice of units, waiting lists, we're checking in on choice. Then we're checking on, do they have choice in the living arrangements? Can people decide who is being able to move into the units into that same apartment? Now we ask the peers this question because peers get to see things from a different perspective through a different lens. Um, but we ask very similar questions of all the staff. So if you're doing a fidelity review, it could sound redundant because you're going to be interviewing lots of people and a lot of the questions are similar. Why do you think we ask the same similar questions of everybody? Any thoughts? Couldn't we just ask one person? We could ask the program director these questions and be done with it, right? Why do you think we would ask multiple people the same types of questions?
Canil says get an accurate, unbiased information. Mindy says multiple points of view. And yeah, and let's see, Atlanta says iterator reliability. And
Very good.
because each person sees things differently. And Sherry says check for consistency.
Exactly. You all hit it on the head. We need to check for consistency. We need to make sure. Sometimes the program directors they will know what the fidelity is about, and they'll give us the answers that they think we want to hear. but sometimes you talk to other staff and you find out different things. Sometimes we make the team who's doing the fidelity review may say to the provider that the team is doing a great job, except they may need to do more training. Some of the staff might not be getting the principles. Sometimes we can tell in a fidelity review whether it's a staffing issue or whether it's a agency issue. So if all the staff are telling us different things, so we talk to the case managers, we talk to the program managers, we talk to the CEO or the head of the agency, the executive director, we talk to the participants. We get all different kinds of answers, and none of them are consistent. What do you think that says about the program?
I'm going to throw my answer in there. They need to develop policies and procedures.
They need to develop policies and procedures, and they need to make sure that they are clear about the dimensions of permanent supportive housing. So that's if everybody does it. If there's only one or two people who give us really baffling answers, then that maybe they didn't train those people well. And so we may say you got a couple of case managers that need more training or housing specialists that need more training. So one of the recommendations is to train all of your housing specialists on permanent supportive housing so that they're all clear. We would not look at if a couple of people said it that was necessarily an agency issue. It just might be those two staff person haven't been trained well. If we have the participants saying one thing, saying that this program was horrible and nobody ever, gets to do, they don't get to do what they want. They never got to pick their own unit. When they call in, nobody wants to speak to them, blah, blah, blah. And the agency tells us everything is fine. If you were a fidelity reviewer, what would that say to you? The participant is saying everything is horrible. The staff are saying everything is perfect.
Mindy says they're not speaking with their clients. Emily says there is some disconnect.
There is a disconnect. And so our job as fidelity reviewers is to try to figure out where the disconnect is. Now, if we interview a few tenants or a few participants and they're all saying that same thing, then we need to really take a look at this program. And then we have to go look at those policies and procedures. We need to see if the participants are just unhappy or is there really a problem with this program. And so that's where the policies and procedures come in handy. That's where the documentation, looking at the file folders, come in handy. Is because you can kind of, if you get the information from several sources, you can kind of say, okay, this must be true. We're getting it from the policies and procedures. We see the documentation, and the staff and client and the participants are all saying the same thing. We can trust what we're reading and what we're hearing. So we need to do checks and balances when we do this review because we want to be fair. We want to, the goal of doing this review is not to catch an agency doing something that they shouldn't. It's to help the agencies do the best program they can possibly do. And so the fidelity review comes in and will make recommendations to the agency. Here are areas that we feel like you can improve based on what we've seen and based on what we've heard from the participants and the staff and read all your policies and procedures. Here are places that you can do do some work in. Here are some places that need improvement. And then the agency can make a plan to address those issues or decide that they want to address those issues. Um, but that is really what we're trying to do when we do these Fidelity site visits. It's not anything about this is you know, we come in to say, got you. We want programs to do well. And sometimes it takes an outside group to help you look at your programs. One of the things that we did in one state, the state was pretty. They wanted the agencies to do their own fidelity reviews, and guess what? All the agencies did their fidelity reviews, and guess what score all the agencies got?
28.
28. They were all perfect. Even the ones that had never placed or helped anybody get housing got a 28. Because the agencies were looking at it and they're looking at it through their lens, not being objective. It's sometimes hard to be objective when it's yours because you know in your head what should be there, but you don't pay attention to if it's really there. If that makes sense.
This is Wanda. I just want to throw in that Melody kind of decided that these fidelity reviews that we perform should be a learning collaborative approach.
Mm-hmm.
And so we bring in folks from other agencies and we share information back and forth. And like a reviewer could tell you something about how they do their program that you might like and want to adopt. Vice versa, you might have something in your program that a reviewer likes and wants to adopt and take back to their agency. And so it really isn't an audit. It is a learning collaborative approach to quality improvement.
No, absolutely. And it's always been that. It's always been about here, let's take an objective look at your program and help you to improve your program. Also, when other agencies or when other people go out to other programs, this is all how Wiki started. When we started doing this years back, people would go to other programs and they would be like, "Oh, that form. Can you send me a copy of that form?" And so everybody was trading information in the fidelity review. Um, and that's what it was about. And so we decided that some of those forms were really great forms, and they ended up on Wiki because we wanted to promote and keep that learning collaborative going because some people have come up with some very creative ways to do things. And it's nice when you can find that and get it from somebody else, and that way you don't have to recreate the wheel.
Absolutely. And I have seen some folks have signed up for the supportive housing wiki. Again, I'm just going to put in a plug. We have one for supportive housing. We have one for supported employment. And we also have one for peers, which I don't have access to, and I'm not quite sure why, but I'll work on that. And they're online electronic libraries. They're completely free. We store a lot of information on there and forms and resources. So I really encourage you to sign up for that.
I totally concur, and I always refer everybody to them. Here's the last interview I want to share with you is the one of the actual participants. We asked them to tell us about their housing situation. Where do you live now? Where would you like to live? I bet most of you can tell me why we asked that question. Where do you live now? Where would you like to live? Right? Everybody can answer that question. Why do we ask that question?
I'm not seeing any responses.
All right. Well, the
Oh,
reason
choice, client choice.
yeah,
Choice is most important. Choice, self-determination, to see if choice plays a part, to get their insight and input.
absolutely. So we asked that question because if they're living someplace now, but they want to be someplace different, the next question that's not on this page would be, well, why are you in this place if you want to be in this type of place? Now, I've had some people say to me, well, we talked, me and my housing specialist talked, and we agreed that, what we were going to do is take this approach. I'm going to start off in this type of housing because I couldn't get into that, what I want to be in, but that's the long-term goal. Now, I've seen some other people say, well, that's what they had available, and they told me I had to live there. That was my only choice. So we know that the agency isn't providing choice. And sometimes the person might be living somewhere, but they don't want to be there. But I had one lady say, well, the staff did everything right. The staff helped me find this place. I chose this place. It was my choice. And now I hate this place. And I said, really? Like, what happened? And she said, well, we came to see it, and I saw people in the apartment building with their pets, with their dogs, and a lot of people were out walking their dog, and I wanted to have my dog. And I saw that this place accepted dogs, so I chose it. And she said, but it was my choice. But now I hate it because what happens, I came here on the weekday, and it was such a quiet neighborhood, and people were walking their pets, and it was just so quiet. And she said, I moved in, and the weekend came, and the place was so loud and so noisy. And she was like, so I learned that the next time I pick a place, I'm not going to just pick a place that allows pets. I'm also going to visit the place in the evening and on the weekend to see if that's indeed where I want to live when my lease is over. I think that was the kind of success that I would be proud to have in my program, because she had picked out this place. She picked it out for her own reasons. And then she figured out what she didn't do in picking that place. And so she was already making the decision and said, I'm going to start working with my housing specialist because my lease is going to end in about 6 months. And that I want to move. I don't want to renew this lease, but I want to find another place that I can move into that, you know, I feel safe on the weekends. That is a success. And that program was doing what they were supposed to do. And she also was taking ownership of, I picked this place, I made a mistake, and I get it, and the next time I'm not going to make the same mistake again. That I was impressed. Um we asked people where were they living before this program. Why do we ask that question? Where were you living before this program?
No responses yet.
Okay, well, the reason we ask this question is because we want to make sure that the program is working with homeless people who are homeless. So if people say, well, before this program, I was living in this program, or I was in this temporary housing, and we see everybody coming from a temporary housing program, this program is not working with homeless people. They're working with this temporary housing program. We want to see the majority of people coming through this program being homeless, or dealing with homelessness. Now, if they were couch surfing, that's different. But if they actually came from another program or they were in another housing provider, that's not what this is about. This is not about rapid rehousing. This is about helping people who are dealing with homelessness get into housing that they want. All right.
Let me just throw in there that for HARPS teams, you have a certain priority population. FCS, you have a targeted population. And that's just kind of the way it has to be, to get paid. So keep that in mind when you're being reviewed or reviewing those types of programs.
Exactly. Yeah, we're not going to be punishing you if you have to take a certain type of person. We just want to make sure that you're getting that target audience that you want to get. We're asking you, who are you working with on your housing? We want to know who the person is working with. Are they working with a housing specialist, a peer specialist, case manager, other? They may be working with all. We ask them, what barriers have you encountered? We want to make sure that we are trying to eliminate barriers, right? Remember that this is zero exclusion. We don't want people to have to face barriers to get into housing. So this is where we're asking that question. What would make this program better? It's been interesting asking that questions of participants. A lot of the times they're like, no, the program's great. Sometimes they, of course, say, well, more money, we need more money. Why the staff should get more money. There should be more money to help us pay rent, blah, blah, blah. But I've also had some staff say there's too much turnover. I had one woman say, I've been here in this housing for 4 months. And in that 4 months, I've had 4 different housing specialists because the turnover is so great that, and she said, and some of the housing specialists that they are bringing in, I know more about what's in the community than they do. That's not a good endorsement of a program, is it? When there's so much turnover, and I know agencies can't do much about that, but you can see how that affects the programs. And so some of the information we gave to that agency was, the turnover is really affecting the programs, and some of the people being brought in are not seasoned enough or don't know the resources and haven't had a chance to learn the resources. So you need to have some type of orientation or training for new staff so that they, before they're out there trying to work with the participants, they know a little bit about what's going on. And then the question we always ask is there anything else we should know about how things are going? So that's how we do interviewing. So we interview all of the staff. And if you see here, I have different interviews. We interview the housing specialists and we interview all of them. Sometimes we interview them as a group. A lot of times we interview them separately. We also interview the supported housing program manager, and we also interview the director. We want to make sure we know that a lot of times in order to do the housing, you have to have the director be on board, and the director may have to make some changes in how the agency does business because this program is demanding that business be done in a different way. We also look at file reviews and seeing what's in the files. We get one sheet per file to complete. And here some of the things that we look at when we're reviewing files is there a copy of an HQS inspection or some type of inspection? Or if it's subsidized housing, then we assume there's an inspection that's already done. So we don't need to see a copy of the inspection if it's subsidized, but if it's not subsidized, we want to see some type of inspection done of the apartment. And in that wiki is a form you can use, and you can put that in the file, and that'll satisfy this part of looking at a file. We want to make sure that in each of the files there's a lease, a copy of the lease, or whatever the agreement is. Sometimes it's not a lease, it's an agreement, or sometimes it's a program rule, some program rules. We still need to see copies in the file. We also look at the types of housing that people are moving into. We want to see a variety of housing. We don't want to see everybody moving into a Oxford house, because that says to us that maybe people aren't getting a choice. Maybe we have an agreement, or maybe we think that, this is okay. We put everybody in an Oxford house, and then after that, they can go into some different type of housing. We want to know the location of the housing. We want to make sure that people are being integrated. We don't want to see everybody. And I've seen this, and sometimes I understand why people are doing it, or why programs do it. I've seen where people find a couple of landlords that are amenable to your programs, and you move everybody into those apartments. Um, you may take a hit on integration, but that may not be the worst thing. I think it's important for people, the program managers or program directors, to make some choices like that, but making conscious choices.
Kit Malone has a question. Kit, it's kind of a long one. You want me to unmute you and you can ask? Go ahead.
Oh, hi. I'm just curious to know how we're treating paper files. I know that my agency still wants us to create all the paper files for everyone, but I'm just wondering how long this, we don't know how long this COVID thing is going to go on. And I have
Right.
so much electronic documentation and electronic communication that I have to print out. It's almost like there's more paper now.
Yeah.
Will we ever get to just go electronic? Because I have everything that I could possibly need electronically, but creating paper files it's taking so much time away from direct service.
Yeah, no, and so why are you having to do the paper files?
Well, their assumption, I think our agency's assumption, is that we really need to have those paper files for when we do get a review, or when
No. We can also look at files on the computer.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you don't have to have a paper file. The only thing you might need to have, you might need to scan in copies of the leases, and scan in copies of the HQS. But no, we definitely look at computer systems. All we will ask is that one staff person be there to show us where stuff is, so that we know how to find it.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
That's great.
You don't need to do paper copies. Tell your agency to stop wasting paper.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Kit, I just wanted to add in, I was just recently part of a Fidelity review with Amanda and Kimberly, and we did it all virtually. So we didn't have to go to the office.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, and even if we go to the office, we don't necessarily need paper. We can say everything's virtual. We just need somebody to help guide us through all the files.
Oh, I'm so relieved. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So yeah, good. I'm glad that we can stop wasting paper. So yeah, you don't need to have all of this be in paper form. There's a spreadsheet on Wiki that you can capture a lot of this information, because a lot of times what the staff will ask is a bunch of questions or ask for some information up front. You can keep that all on a spreadsheet, and when it's time for a review, you can just send that spreadsheet to the reviewers. They can do some of that work before they get to talking to the staff. But yeah, we don't require paper. You can do it all virtually. It could all be in a computer system. You just need to help us get through finding it and looking at it. All right. So I usually, if we weren't doing this virtually, I would have you practice interviewing. Because interviewing, you know, I gave you or you have those sheets of all those interviews, but part of what's not in there is if a person says something that you're not clear about, or it goes into a different topic, it's okay to ask questions that are outside of that form. You can ask another question for clarification. Those forms are guides. They're not all the questions. It's to get you started. In order to be a reviewer, you have to be fairly clear on the dimensions, what those 7 dimensions are. So when you're sitting there, you know how to ask a question about, sometimes I'm asking a question about choice and something else pops up, and I don't want to sit there and go, wait, I'm not there yet on the form. I need to be able to go, that form is just a guide for me. I need to make sure everything on that form is answered, but I don't have to go in the order of that form. Does that make sense? But I know what the fidelity measures are. I know, and one of the things, if you're a fidelity reviewer, that you should have in front of you is the score sheet with what are the things that you're looking for. And that way, that sheet will help guide you and here it is. This is meant to help guide you, and I'm trying to figure out how I can increase the size of this, because this is even too small for my eyes. Does that help? You've seen this sheet before yesterday.
Much better.
It tells you how to look at each of these dimensions. It tells you everything that you need to know. So whether you're doing a fidelity review or you are getting reviewed, you know what people are looking for. It's not a secret. It's here. It's all in these forms. And you can use that to make sure that your programs understand and know what's being looked at. And so I would if I'm doing a fidelity review, when I first started doing them years ago, probably like 15 years ago, I had this in front of me because I didn't have them all memorized, because we're not expecting you to get to know all this information overnight. So I had them in front of me, and I had this in front of me because this, for me, had the stuff broken down in a way that I knew how to put that information out there. So, I'm looking for, tenants have choice of type of housing. That tells me what I need to know, what I'm looking for when I'm asking questions. And so this goes through the um first five parts of the fidelity. Oh, I did it a little bigger on this one because I realized, but then, oops, you see, it's just, if you look at 1.1b, tenants choose among multiple units or tenants are assigned to a unit. It tells you right there what the score for that person is. So once you get comfortable with this, then you can all figure out how to make this work. The way we do fidelity reviews is it's a team approach. So there's a team of people that will meet and talk about what the review, what information in the review, when is it happening, what's going to be done, who's in charge of what. Um, and so some people may get to do certain parts virtually, or some people will, may do an interview with this person. Somebody might, when you do interviews, it's not the whole team interviewing one person. Usually it's one or two people from the team interviewing one person, and somebody else might be interviewing another person. So you all get to interview people. One of the things that this allows us to do is to see the whole picture. Now, I know a lot of you've probably seen this before, but how many people do you see in that tree?
Keneal says 12. Cedric says 6. I'm going with 8.
Uh-huh. We all are looking at it differently, aren't we?
Colin says 11. Cedric's now to 12.
Yeah, the more you look at it, the more you see, right?
Sherry says 10. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it really is important that we work as a team to do this, and we all are going to see it differently depending on how we're looking at it. So that's why it's important that we do this in teams, and at the end of, the review, the team gets to talk through this whole process, talk through the score sheet, like what did they see. And sometimes we'll sit there and, we'll be torn because somebody's saying, no, I think it's a 1, and somebody's like, no, it's a 2.5. When we don't know, we go back to the score sheet, we go back to all the documentation, and we look at it and we say, okay, are these things here or not? If they're there, then we have to go with the score that they deserve. It's hard sometimes when you're reviewing a program and you want to so badly give them an A for effort, even though you are not seeing the documentation. I think, we need part of the team is making sure that the team is consistent, making sure that the team is in consensus, making sure everybody is on the same page. Here's why we're giving them that score. Here's what they deserve based on what we saw. Now, they might have said some things, but we don't see any proof of that. So we have to go with this score.
If it isn't documented, it didn't happen.
Exactly. And that's where all agencies, not all, but the majority of agencies get dinged. Documentation. People don't document well. I've been to some places where the person is saying to me, "Oh, well, this person did this, and this," and I'm looking at the file going, "I don't see that anywhere in the file." "Oh, well, I didn't get the document it yet." Well, when did this happen? "Oh, about 4 weeks ago." And you haven't documented yet? What if you got sick and somebody else had to pick up this file and work with this person? They don't, in this file, it says that the person has one child. Now I'm sitting here talking to you and finding out that she has two children and she's pregnant, but that is nowhere in the file. So if I came in to work with this person and I have to help them look for housing, I could get them in the wrong housing because I don't know based on this file how many children they have. And it's gonna matter, 3 children in a 1 bedroom is too much. 3 children and 1 parent. You at least need to have 2 bedrooms. And, so it's about that. Sometimes the documentation gets us caught up. People aren't documenting what they're doing. And if you're not documenting what you're doing, you don't get credit for it. And we want you to get credit for it. And we also want to make it so that anybody who comes in after you can also see all the information and continue to work with that person in a seamless fashion, as opposed to that person having to tell their story over and over again. So it's part of making sure we are doing the best by our participants, but it's also making sure that we are also putting our co-workers or other people in a position that they can keep doing what they need to do. So go
Can
ahead.
I throw something in there?
Please.
I'm sorry, I'm taking a bigger role in this than I had planned, but um, on the documentation, especially documenting choice, I look for that kind of thing in the notes or the what the peer writes about what they showed the participant, like what apartments they talked about, and I even want to see documentation of what the participant turned down and why.
Yes.
So if I showed them a building and they said, well, I like it, but not this neighborhood because of X and X factor or whatever. That should be in the notes, the chart notes or whatever.
It
And
could be in the chart notes, and there's also a form in Wiki that is a choice form that you can put all that information in, so that the people who come in don't have to read through all the notes.
awesome.
So just, there are ways to document this stuff. There's ways to do it, in a somewhat more painless way. I know documentation is not the fun thing. When I was a case manager and a program manager, I hated documentation, but I knew it was important and I knew it had to be there. So a fidelity review, for those of you who've never had one, um, there's an agenda sent out to the person that we're in contact with. So they get an agenda, and that agenda has times when we can interview different people. So that way the staff can know when it's their time to do an interview, they can block that time off. The program director, the director of the agency knows when it is and has it on their schedule. It's important that there's an agenda. We also talk about the sources of information. We just talked about those sources of information: policies and procedures, interviews, and the charts. We also do the interviewing, the participant, staff, management, referral sources, and the referral sources are important because, remember, if you're taking referrals and that's how you get your participants, we need to look at your referral sources and talk to them to make sure that they're not picking and choosing, that people still have a choice and that access to housing is fairly easy. All the person has to say is, I want housing. We don't want to see any referral source saying, yeah, you want it, but you're not ready. We're not going to do the referral yet. That may come later after you get yourself clean and sober. We don't want to see that. We want to see, if the person wants housing, that they are referred to housing. We also do some observation in the fidelity review. We observe a team meeting. We want to see how the team interacts together and what things are covered by the team. Are you talking about cases, or are you just talking about agency functions, what the agency needs to do. We would like to hear you talking about some cases. We would like to hear you sharing information with the team, because this is how the team is going to know what's going on. And the team can also provide you some help with dealing with your cases. So we watch the team meetings. We also may watch a meeting between the team and the clinical staff. If there's a team meeting that happens on a regular basis with the clinical staff, we would like to observe that to see how that team works, to see if everybody on that team understands permanent supportive housing and is in support of it. And then there's the consensus scoring. That's where we all meet and talk about the scores and what the score should be, and making sure that we're all in agreement. And then the final parts of the fidelity review is the team together writes up different parts of the review. Now, being on a team is great because you don't have to write the whole thing yourself. So each person, will pick a question that they feel comfortable writing up the answer to. And usually you already have the information that's going to go into that one, because in the consensus scoring, you've been talking about it. You've talked about why you're giving this team a score of whatever, a 4 on this. If it's a 4 that people get, a 4 is the highest you can get. And if a team gets a 4, that means there's nothing to improve. So you shouldn't have to write anything down if it's a 4. If you find yourself feeling like you need to write down something other than good job on a 4, then it shouldn't be a 4. Anything lower than a perfect score, you need to write why the team got that score. What was missing? What needs to happen in order to get that score of a 4? And then the last part of a fidelity review is that the team who was reviewed can come up with an action plan to improve their fidelity scores. They can work on whatever parts of the fidelity that they want to work on to improve their score. Or they could say, we're on a good pace, we're okay with this score. Or they can say, oh, we can improve this, and that'll get us up higher. And we can improve this we're going to leave alone. So that's, that becomes a part of what the agency has to decide. Questions on that? This is basically what's all on the agenda. You see all the interviews down here. We need to save time to review charts. We a lot of times we may want to observe landlord outreach efforts. We want to see flyers and posters talking about permanent supportive housing at the agency. We don't want it to just be this little program that nobody knows about. So these are all the things that we need to set aside time when we do a fidelity review. And let's see. So this one is the first steps. A lot of times we do some prep work before the fidelity review. This is where that spreadsheet comes in handy. We may ask for some information up front, because if we ask for that information up front, we can already start to do the process and not put the team through a really long process. Some of the things that are important to remember is that we need to be neutral as reviewers. If somebody says something that you feel is not appropriate, or they don't know what they're talking about, you're sitting there going, I can't believe you just said that. Your face needs to be neutral. You don't sit there and go, oh, you're doing what? Oh my goodness, you're not supposed to do that. No, 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 no. We have to be neutral. We have to sit there. We have to listen. We take notes and we save our recommendations until we're ready to share it with the agency. So, that last one, don't show facial expressions. If you hear or see something in contrast to the fidelity, that is a key. If you're going to be a fidelity reviewer, you can't be sitting there making faces, because the agency or the person you're talking to is going to notice and not want to say anything or feel like they said something wrong. And it may not be wrong. It may be that you just understood it and it was not, you felt it was wrong. But we don't want to, have that. The other thing we need to do when we do the final recommendations is we always need to talk about what the team is doing well. Every team is doing something right. It's not everything is wrong. We need to see if we have follow-up questions that we didn't get answered. Sometimes it gets a little hectic when you're doing a review and certain things didn't get answered and you need to go back for follow-up, because you don't want to give the team a low score when you didn't have all the information. We need to have a sense of how we are going to score every dimension. You can't walk out of there feeling uncertain of how you're going to score a dimension. We need to make sure we have all the information that we need to do that. And then if we need additional information, we go back to the agency. We say we need this information. You have until this day to get it to us. If we don't get the information by that day, we'll have to go ahead and do the report. And the report is done, it's written, and it's written in as a team. Each person will get, 2 to 3 questions to answer on the Fidelity review team. It's not that difficult. You're gonna have a person who is really an expert on doing the permanent supportive housing fidelities. So you're not by yourself. You're not gonna be asked to do a ton of work to do this, to get it done. And you don't have to come up with the answers because you'll come up with it as a team. And here are the people that, if you're on the eastern side of the state, you work with Amanda. If you're on the west side of the state, you work with Kimberly. And I'm interested in, are there any people on this call that are interested in being Fidelity reviewers? I think you get paid for it too, or your agency gets paid for it, I should say.
I'm getting some responses here. Jamie Spinelli says she's interested. Matthew Garrett's interested. Mindy Hyatt's interested. And Kip Malone says yes, very much. And Michael Hardy says possibly.
Okay. So I highly recommend becoming a Fidelity reviewer. One, it will make your program better and your work better. Two, if you have any interest in moving up in an agency or moving up in your career, learning to do a Fidelity review and design, I think it teaches you how to design a program. If you pay attention and you do it, it could be a process to help you move up in your career. So I highly recommend being a Fidelity reviewer, because you get a lot more out of it than you think you do. Are
So
there questions?
several more people have said they are interested. Michael wants to know if this is possible in our current environment. Michael, we've been doing virtual Fidelity reviews since the COVID started, and it seems to be working well. It's a little different arrangement, but it seems to work.
Yeah. So all you have to do is say, if you're interested, you say you're interested. They're doing this virtually right now for as long as they have to do it virtually. And so basically the teams are meeting in one of the virtual platforms, and they're doing virtual meetings with the agency that they're doing a fidelity review of. So it's all
Right.
virtual.
Right. And so if you're interested, please contact either Amanda or Kimberly, depending on which side of the state you're on.
And I think Wanda's gonna pass on the names of the people who are interested, so that they, you know, Amanda and Kimberly will know who has an interest in doing a fidelity review. But it's everybody so far. Everybody who has done a fidelity review are glad that they did it, and they learned a lot more than they would have gotten in a classroom or in a webinar, because when you're doing it, you get to see stuff. And it also, a lot of times I see the reviewers writing notes to themselves because they see something that the agency's doing well that they want to learn how to do, or they see a way to do it better. And so I highly recommend it. I know that everybody who's done it has had nothing but great things to say about the experience. How much time do we have, Wanda?
I thought we were going till noon, but I'm not
No,
sure.
no, we might be going to noon. So are there questions?
Let's see. Well, there's more comments.
Okay.
People interested. Jamie says, I was a peer reviewer when I previously worked for a PATH team, and it was highly beneficial and a great experience. And Michael says, cross-site fidelity reviews are awesome. And yeah, Monica's also interested in being a reviewer. And Monica, you got your hand up if you want me to
Yeah, I
unmute
was
you.
gonna. Yeah, please. Ask me questions. Make sure you. I want to make sure you understood all the information we've gone over. So please ask questions.
So Monica lowered her hand.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you off, Monica.
So I'm just going to chime in with what I know about the money for doing fidelity reviews. My understanding was it was tied to a contract. So your agency would sign a contract for you to go out as a reviewer. And once you completed
Or
that,
to do it virtually. So
right,
because that's
well,
a time commitment.
right, you would be not doing services those days. You would have to set aside time to participate virtually on a fidelity review. And then once that review is complete, then you would be able to bill for the money. There also, I'm not sure, at one time we did offer money to have your agency reviewed as well. So be sure to ask Amanda or Kimberly about either one that you're interested in. And
Yeah, I know they were paying agencies to be to volunteer to have a fidelity review, because we know it takes time away from the things you need to do. So they decided that, you know, paying the agencies to do a fidelity review was a fair thing to do. And your agency also gets paid if you are going out to do a fidelity review, because that's taking time away from other work. So you should check with Amanda or Kimberly about that, depending on the side of the state that you're on. So does everybody feel comfortable with the 7 dimensions of fidelity, or the 7 dimensions of permanent supportive housing? Everybody know those now?
getting some yeses. Mindy's got a lot to say, so Mindy, I'm gonna unmute you. Hold on here. All right, try it now.
So mine's not technically related to what you just asked, but I was wondering if the fidelity review is adaptable to the different locations, because a lot of the information that you were giving was talking about places that are linked with housing already or have a site that they run. And the place
Uh,
that I work doesn't have that.
no, and that's the majority of places don't have a site that they're working with. Usually you're working with private landlords, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. No, and one of the things I was gonna say is that when we do fidelity reviews, we do take into consideration the places you're setting. So that's gonna make a big difference of how your agency is gonna be reviewed. Um, what we would like to see is we're fine with the private landlords. That's how most agencies operate. Most agencies don't have their own housing. So that's what we're usually used to. And so there are pros and cons with both. Having your own housing, there's pros and cons. Pros are, yeah, it's easy to get people into housing. The con is people don't have choice. If you're working with private landlords, it's gonna be hard to get a lot of landlords to work with you, but on the other side, people will have more choice. So yeah, we take that into consideration. And I just want to say the thing that you have to remember is that the number that you get on your fidelity review is not, I repeat, is not as important as the what is written. Because the part that is written is what the team saw, what they saw that you're doing well, and what they saw that you can improve on. So getting a 2.5, yeah, okay, that's not the best, but it's not the worst, but reading what the team said. Now, lots of things will be taken into consideration. For instance, one of the things that will be taken into consideration during this time of COVID is that we're in a time of COVID, and that there are some limitations on what you can do in your programs. That is taken into consideration. We also take into consideration the housing market, because the housing market is tough. And so finding affordable housing in some places of Washington is not as easy as it is in some other places in Washington. So that's also taken into consideration. So, there might be comments in the report that says, well, tenants aren't getting as much choice, but part of this is due to the fact that there is not a lot of choice. There's not a lot of housing. What Because we're seeing that the agency is out there looking for this housing, but they're not finding a lot. And so that will go into the report. So we try our best to be as fair as possible, and we know that you don't have control over everything. You don't have control over the housing market. You don't have control over the fact that this is COVID. So all of that is taken into consideration. Did that answer your question? Are there other questions? I really want you to feel very comfortable and know um, what about what is expected from you in far as having a fidelity site visit or being a fidelity reviewer. Do people feel like they're comfortable in being able to um score another agency? Not that you need to know it all, but do you feel like at least you have a good base for what the scoring entails?
We got moderately comfortable, yes, and yes.
Okay. Excellent. So I'm glad. If there's some places that you're not comfortable, please tell me. I know that there are that it's a lot to take on or a lot to deal with, because it's just not a simple yes, no. format. And some of the items are going to be scored differently than other items um, on the scale. So some things are going to be scored tenant by tenant, or person by person, or participant by participant. Some things are going to be scored as the program as a whole. So there's some differences for programs. So I think it's important to understand that, um, and make sure that when you're go in to look at a program, that you're understanding that all of it is not going to be done the same way. For instance, rent payment is tenant by tenant, or person by person, or participant by participant. You don't do all of those at one time. And you can't. And so you remember what I said about scoring, is taking those scores and looking at the scores and counting them all up and dividing by the number of participants. Any other questions?
I got, Emily says, I feel like I would rely on the worksheets, but otherwise I have a good base. And Allison says, thank you. I've been through this before, but I always learn from Pat. Please thank her.
Thank you, everybody. I'm not going to put you through making you listen to more. If you feel like you don't have questions, um, that's fine. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. And I know I gave you my email address on Wednesday. If there's anything that you feel like you need more clarity on, feel free to email me and I'll do my best. If you feel like your program needs some technical assistance, then you should be contacting either Amanda if you're on the east side of the state, or Kimberly if you're on the west side, and talk to them about things you think your program need. If you feel like your program manager or director doesn't understand all of the Fidelity, or figure out, or feel like they don't understand all of the permanent supportive housing dimensions, you might want to just, say, oh, I learned these things in this training, and I think we should reach out to Amanda or Kimberly to learn more about Fidelity, because what I learned in this training was different than how we're doing it. And that way you can be subtle and get them to hopefully contact either Amanda or Kimberly to get more of a sense of how this is going to work.
Kit says, thank you, hugely informative. Bill says, thank you, very informative. Michael says, I also learn a little bit more from Pat each time. I worked on the porch program
Oh,
with
cool.
HCA and Optum years ago.
Yeah.
Mindy says, thank you. Matthew says, thank you, this was awesome. Jan thanks you. Adelina thanks you. And Cedric says thanks.
Well, thank you everybody for coming, and it's been my pleasure. I wish we could be face to face, but that's not possible now. But at some point, hopefully I'll get to meet all of you. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Pat. Thank you all for coming. You guys have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.